Hello and welcome to the StudyCIMA discussion of the February 2017 operational case study. This time we are looking at a company named Mavis Vendabai. So it seems to be a name of a person. As we look at the company logo, we see it's a lady carrying some bee honey with her next to probably a wooden beehive. So you have the contents of the pre-scene given, well, consisting of more than 26 pages, comparatively longer pre-scene compared to the previous sessions where on average the number of pages were somewhere around 20 to 22 pages. So if you go through the contents, introduction, there's some information on honeybees, the product portfolio or information on products, the production process, customers and suppliers, key people at Mavis Vendabai, so that's probably the board of directors and other key personnel. Latest director approved and audited financial statements, budgeted information, something relevant for P1, and financial statements would be relevant for F1. Article on the rise of beekeeping, so probably some information on increasing demand. Extract from a thread on the popular Honeypot Beekeepers Forum, probably some sort of a trade association. Mavis Vendabai's position in the beekeeping equipment supply market, so probably we can judge the strength of this company in the industry and the extent of competition. And finally, as usual, in almost every pre-scene session in the past, you have information on the tax rules of the country. So seems like the name of the country is Thailand. Right, so 26 pages. So let's get started with the introduction. Mavis Vendabai is a business that manufactures and retails wooden beehives. So two very important terms for you: manufacture and retail. So if you take most of the previous case studies, we have been focusing mainly on manufacturing firms, except for two occasions where there was something on a supermarket and another occasion on a chain of hotels. And apart from that, every other case study has been focusing on manufacturing. Because if you take most of the areas that you cover for P1 and of course E1, it would be very simple to test a lot of areas when it's a manufacturing company. Especially if you take P1, you'll have concepts like standard costing. So standard costing would be very much applicable to a company producing standard units rather than services, since there can be differences in the provision of one service to the next, unlike manufactured products where most of the time it will be a standard product, which means they'll be able to compute something called the standard cost card, which you have already learnt. And also we have areas in E1 such as, say, capacity planning. We have one full area on operations management covering around 15% of the E1 syllabus. So those concepts would be particularly applicable when it comes to a manufacturer. Right, so they are manufacturing wooden beehives. Wooden, right? So obviously using wood. What sort of ethical issues can this have? Right? So we know that with our general knowledge that products using wood, well, it results in having to cut down trees. So what type of steps might be taken by the company to ensure that it does not have a big impact on the environmental damage? Environmental management is a very important part of your P1 syllabus. There's one sector or there's one area dedicated to it with some information you need to remember. And beehives, well, then again, ethics can apply. To what extent is this ethical? So there have been various schools of thought in these regards. If you take pressure groups that are dedicated to protecting the rights of animals, they have been raising concerns against nurturing or having beehives maintained by humans, right? So they claim that it's unfair for the bees, since bees do a lot of hard work in order to gather the honey, and people just steal it away. Well, I'll not go into too much detail about the ethical schools of thought. Probably we might come across certain information later on in the pre-seed, so maybe we'll focus on it then. The business was established 70 years ago. Right, so quite a long history. 70 years ago by Mavis Vanderby and her husband Benjamin. So most probably they would have started this as a small business. It is based in Tuckland, right? So that's the country we are concerned with. So as you might already be aware, almost every pre-scene session, the examiner has been throwing in an imaginary country, a fictitious country. So there is no requirement at all for you to do in-depth research and find as to which real-world country is this referring to. Please do not waste time on that. This is an imaginary country. Don't have the impression that examiner is picking a random country and maybe changing the name, and the examiner is expecting you to do research and figure out what the country is. No, that's not how things work in the operational case study. Right, which has the T dollar as its currency. So they have a currency that is unique to the country. Now remember the fact that I am discussing this pre-scene assuming that you haven't read through the pre-scene. So I will be discussing on certain key areas that you can be tested upon. So I'm assuming that you have some sort of a notepad next to you, or maybe you have opened up a Word document. If you haven't, please pause this video and please make sure that you get hold of a notepad or open up a Word document so that you can type out any important areas that I discuss, because I'll be extensively looking at areas that are the examiner is quite fond of testing, and areas that can be really relevant to this pre-scene that you can expect at the exam. So I highlighted the T dollar. Probably if Mavis Vanderby is dealing with other countries, either importing, say, components and other types of material, or probably exporting their beehives to other countries, there would definitely be implications with regards to the foreign currency or the exchange rates. And we know that in F1 we learn a standard called IAS 21, how we deal with foreign currency or exchange rate related transactions. So that is something you need to brush up on, right? So moving on to the next sentence, Tuckland has a temperate climate. And it's situated in the northern hemisphere. Well, when you say northern hemisphere, that's too general, because northern hemisphere is half of the earth, right? So it could be, I don't know, USA, Russia. Well, as I mentioned earlier, there's no requirement to bother about which area this country is in. But the fact that the country has a temperate climate. Now let me explain you what these terms mean. A temperate climate is generally where a country experiences a small deviation between the extremes of its temperatures. So it's not that it's a tropical country. Probably they might have a summer and a winter, but the difference in the temperature is not that high, right? So as we know, there are certain countries where in summer the temperature could go more than 30 degrees, maybe 35 degrees, and in winter it could go really low, say minus 15, minus 20, right? So that's not exactly a temperate climate, but just what you need to understand from this is the country has a small deviation when it comes to the temperatures. And if you do some research into the lifestyle of the bees, right? So what they need in order to survive, you will understand the fact that this industry originated mainly in the tropical climate. So bees would really be fond of a climate, a temperate climate basically, right? Because if it's if it's too cold, then bees would struggle with survival in terms of maintaining their food, because as we know, uh, bees have to work very hard for their food, right? So many bees, they do a lot of work and extract honey from flowers, and they all build it up uh, in one place, and that is done actually inside a beehive. So if it's too cold, well, then it will affect the food supply. So what you need to understand from here, the bottom line is, you can expect a good demand for beehives in this country, probably because of the temperature or the climate conditions, right? Mavis Venderby is owned equally by Thomas Venderby. Well, probably a family member who holds the position of the managing director, and Jacinta Corey, the sales and marketing director, who are the great grandchildren of Mavis and Benjamin. So it's still revolving around the Venderby family, which is a very good sign to see. Right? So more often than not, you find businesses that's started, well, after some time it could fall into the hands of another party, but probably due to the strong relationship maintained by family members, well, they still manage to keep things under control and within the family. So it's a very good sign. It's good prospects for the future. And in terms of legal ownership, well, this is definitely not a public limited company, because it clearly says it's owned equally by two shareholders, right? The managing director and the sales and marketing director. So how this is important is, you see, there are some areas in your subjects that are relevant only to public limited companies. Now let me be very clear on something. Please do not limit yourself to areas that are only relevant to a private company. For example, if you take corporate governance, well, you might be under the impression right now, hey, this is not a public limited company, so why should I bother studying corporate governance? It's not relevant. But you're wrong. Just think of a situation like this. Now, at your actual exam, let's say the variant that you're facing, the first question says, the first task, or the first section rather, it says, well, Thomas and Jacinta have decided to take Mavis Venderby public. See, now you're in trouble. And what if the first section expects you to give some description on the conditions under corporate governance, or maybe some sort of an accounting standard that is applicable to public limited companies, right? Like operating segments, for instance. Now you're in trouble. So please do yourself a favor and please don't rule out any areas just by looking at the legal ownership of this business. Please make sure that you're thorough with all the areas in your syllabus. Okay. Right. Two types of beehives are manufactured and sold. Right. So they have two products in their portfolio. Manufactured and sold. All right. So the names of these are the box hive and the slatted hive. So I have done some reading of this pre-scene before, so we can expect some detailed information about these two models or these two products later on. Now you see, you're not expected to have a very high technical knowledge on how a beehive is built and conditions required and so on. That is not highly required, but then again, it would come in handy for you to know the components or the material that is structuring these beehives, because if you take an area like costing, well, you need to know the specifics of a product in order to come up with a costing, come up with a cost per unit, and also to advise the management on what type of a costing method would be suitable for the company, right? Something that will be very realistic to be used. So as we move along, we will find some detailed information regarding these two products. Each type of hive has the same component parts and functionality, but has a different shape. Alright, now how does this become important to you? Well, you can think about supply chain management. If you have two products and if they are using the same component parts, well, it will be much easier to source the material needed. So if you are looking at the value chain analysis, well, I'm focusing on the inbound logistics, which is the first primary activity. And it would, well, you can probably stick to a few suppliers because both products need the same type of parts, right? So the sourcing strategy would be less complex. So the difference comes in the production process, or if you take the value chain analysis, we are focusing on the section that says operations, but has a different shape. So this is the part I'm referring to. So probably the shape, it's being done at the factory, right? Each type of hive is manufactured in two different types of wood, cedar and pine. These are the two types of wood used. All hives are sold flat packed, meaning that the customer has to assemble them for themselves. So inbound logistics would include sourcing the parts, the arrival of the material into the business. Operations would involve converting these material like wood, for instance, and other components into beehives. Outbound logistics would include transporting them. Marketing and sales would include, as the word says, pushing it to the customer. After sales service, well, once the product is bought, it would include the services done by the company to the customer. And my thoughts are this last thing I highlighted over here, assemble them for themselves. Well, the customer has to purchase it and get it assembled by themselves. So the question here is, to what extent is this assembling complex, right? So if it's very complex, then Mavis vendor buy could consider the possibility of granting that service by themselves to the customer. So probably send in a sales staff member to the customer's premises and help out the customer in getting the assembly done, right? But we can also assume that most of the customers that purchase beehives, they are probably into this as a hobby, and probably they might have a good knowledge about how to get this done. So in that case, of course, it would be unnecessary. But should Mavis vendor buy provide this additional service, they have few options. Maybe give it free of charge to the customer. That would probably increase the rapport. Or maybe you can charge a certain fee because it's a service at the end of the day, right? Okay, as well as wooden hives, Mavis vendor buy also sells foundation, nothing to do with cosmetics, foundation and frames. All right. Foundation is a base on which bees will form a comb into which honey will be placed. Once again, just like information about the two types of products given here, you will find more information regarding these two products later on in the pre-scene. For now, you are given a general description what a foundation does, and a frame is a wooden support around the foundation. So these are not exactly separate products from the beehive. Well, you need foundation and frames in order to assemble a complete beehive. Each hive, when constructed, will hold up to 20 framed foundations. Frames used to be made by Mavis but are now bought in and sold. Used to be made. Alright, so we have some information on that. But currently they are being bought in and sold. If you thought the same thing I thought, you would have been thinking about P1. Area on decision making, short-term decision making, where we have a section called make or buy decisions. So very much relevant to this sentence. And why have they decided to purchase and sell instead of produce? Well, here we have the answer. It's more cost effective. So this is something that you see in most modern businesses. Take smartphones for instance. You might, rather than produce certain components by yourself, you might decide to buy from an external supplier, right? So one reason being it's cost effective. But as a management accountant, you need to understand the fact that decision making is not always about the dollars, $T in this case, but you also have to look at non-financial factors. So in this case, for a decision like this, yes, true, you might have an external supplier who can give you a better price, but what's the quality? What's the quality of this frame? Is it better than ours? Is it in par with ours, or is it worse than ours? Well, if it's equal in quality or if it's superior in quality, then it makes sense to purchase it. But if not, you're undertaking a reputational risk, right? And also, where is the supplier located? Is the supplier able to deliver products within a very short time? Is the lead time justifiable? And what impression would it create in the customer if we bought and sold instead of make it by ourselves? So these are questions that would have probably been answered by the management team before making this decision, and there's a good chance that things were showing favor of purchasing instead of producing. Okay, foundation is manufactured by Mavis. So frames are purchased, foundation is manufactured, that we know for now. Foundation and frames are sold and packaged separately from the wooden beehives. Well, from what they have described here, you can understand the fact that foundation and a frame, they are not completely isolated products. Well, they are part of a complete beehive. Now, it says that these products are sold separately from wooden beehives. Well, Mavis could introduce the possibility of selling a bundled product, probably at a lower price, right? So product bundling is a strategy that you find in most modern day businesses because they add a lot of value to the customer. So instead of selling the individual parts for, let's say, for example, $100, why not sell a bundle package for $95? Right? Because let's say a customer wants to buy wooden beehives from you, but the frames and foundations from some other business. Now the customer will think twice because the customer gets a benefit by buying everything from you, right? So that way you will attract the customer to purchase the entire package. So we are not very sure whether Mavis is using this strategy for now, but it makes sense to use a strategy like this in order to boost your sales. Next paragraph, Mavis Vendor Buy sells all of its products directly to the public. Right. So we have many manufacturers that liaise with wholesalers, retailers. So in this case, it seems like Mavis Vendor Buy is directly selling to the final customer. This is extremely beneficial in terms of profit margins, because if you go through a wholesaler or some other retailer, that would result in you having to share the profit margin with that party. So lower the amount of links in a chain, higher the profit that can be gained by the manufacturer, or the manufacturer would be able to pass on the cost savings to the customer in a better manner, or in a much higher amount can be passed in form of cost savings by means of a reduced price. It has its own store located at the factory site. Own store at the factory site. So you can sort of visualize the factory on one side and the retail outlet on the other side. It could create a good customer impression because, for example, there are some passionate customers. Not only would they want to buy a wooden beehive, but probably they might be interested in seeing how a wooden beehive is made. Probably Mavis Venderby could facilitate this by giving the customer, say, a free tour around the factory, since it's just located next to the shop. Right? So just a possibility, because it could create a stronger rapport with the customer. And you see, they are selling these products to humans at the end of the day, right? So all of us, we have a psychological side, an emotional side. So if the company not only focuses on making or taking the dollars out of the customer, but also trying to satisfy the customer's emotional needs, like the customer might want to take a tour around the factory, so why not facilitate that opportunity? That would be a very strong marketing tool, right? Although directly it might not give a benefit immediately, well, the customer can always go and talk with his or her friends and family members, and that would give a better impression to the company, right? And also, in terms of outbound logistics, so outbound logistics would be the process where the finished goods are distributed to the customer or the retail outlet. So in this case, they have their own retail outlet. The transport cost would be almost zero, because the factory and the stores are located just next to each other. The store is located inside the factory. The majority of sales are made direct to customers through the Mavis Venderby website or over the telephone. Right, so whether the beehives are delivered to the customer by Mavis Venderby or whether the customer has to pick it up, well, we are not so sure for now. But you see, being a company that has been established 70 years ago and it's still under family control, it's very good to see that most of the sales are made through a technological means, and I'm referring to the website. It's very important to have a strong website if you are a modern day business, because technology, it's getting advanced at a rate, and maybe say 10 to 15 years back, well, e-commerce originated, but now it has penetrated a lot throughout the globe. If you take companies like eBay, Amazon, well, if you look at their sales, you can see the amount of sales they are making, and it's basically everybody knows their name, right? So having a website is extremely important, not only just for sales, but hey, there's nothing you can't do in the website. I mean, you could provide a lot of information to the customer. Probably you could pass information about CSR projects, right, in order to increase your publicity. Well, you can pass information on discounts, promotional offers. So it's definitely a very strong marketing tool. Certain websites of businesses, they give the opportunity to the customer to open their own account, and from this it will facilitate digital marketing, since the business, Mavis, would be able to say mail the customer on certain offers available, right? So many things that can be done out of the website. And the pre-scene stating that majority of sales happening through the website, well, that's a good indication that Mavis Venderby is making use of modern day technology in a very efficient manner. And another very important segment in terms of marketing, well, social media. It's always something you can connect to a website. Most companies in their website they have it linked to their social media pages like Facebook and Twitter, for instance. So this is definitely a very good marketing tool. And if you take the other sales channel, which is through telephones, well, that is something that needs to be handled very carefully, because certain customers, they might need technical information. For example, what are the conditions under which a beehive can be built, right? The geographical, the climatic conditions. And they would also need information on the assembly process sometimes. So it's very important to make sure that whoever who's answering the call from the business's side knows about how these beehives work, and what conditions should exist. So Mavis vendor buyer has to be very careful when it's scheduling work